Crank it up, let it roll. Stars and stripes in my soul. Steel toes on, boots in the gravel. Heartland truth on every channel. Open Bible, flag on the wall. We say what we believe when we don't talk it off. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. they're still talking loud. Gander the free on every spell. Hit that mic, host, let the truth ring out. This is red, white, and raised hell. Cowboy hat, church bell. Can't scare us into silence. We were born to a rail, from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raised hell.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Good morning. Thanks for getting here and being with us. And you got the wrong screen up there, Dylan. Come on, D. Welcome to the show and welcome to the morning, everybody. Appreciate you very much for being here, especially those who tried to get in last night on our personal, private briefing with Senator Bernie Moreno yesterday, which was fantastic. I mean, the content of it, not the mechanics of it. We had issues with, which I'll explain in a few minutes. We had issues with the connectability, but we put it together. Fortunately, the entire thing was recorded, and I spent a good deal of time after the event last night uploading it, not for you, just for the unfiltered insiders, that is. The paid subscribers had this special perk just for them. This is one of the things we give you for supporting the channel, and it's going to be the first, and hopefully they will only get better from here, in a series of what we're doing with respect to private briefings and town hall meetings only with paid subscribers to Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. We're going to have other elected officials beyond Senator Moreno. We're going to have public figures. We're going to have people like Kirsanow. We're going to have people you haven't even seen yet on this program, who are going to be coming in and doing these on an occasional basis. We're going to have, again, this is a perk for being a member. So if you have not yet joined the Unfiltered Insiders crew as a paid subscriber, please click the join button on the locals channel that you see underneath the picture on Rumble, and click that and become one, and you'll be engaged. Yesterday was a little bit clunky, like I said, for a few different reasons. But before I get into all of that, let me say thank you to Senator Moreno. Those of you who have seen the video, it was almost a full hour he gave us. For those of you who have seen it, you know already. For those of you who have not, if you are an Unfiltered insider, you can go on the locals channel right now, and you will see an insiders only link for you, and it's got in the comments the link to the video. It's not for the general public. It is just yours. When you watch it, you'll see what I mean. Senator Moreno was terrific, and the unfettered access that he provided, and answers and full transparency to everything, was just really, really, I don't know, something to behold. I respect so much his willingness to come on and do this and talk to people in the way that he did yesterday. So thank you to Senator Bernie Moreno for that. For those who were not part of it last night, the clunkiness started from Jump Street. I sent an email to everybody who is an Unfiltered insider, excuse me, to tell you, hey, this is how you watch. And not a lot of people got the email. That was a problem. Exporting the list of people who should be on that recipients list, that was a problem. Some people didn't even get it, know what was happening. The ones who did got in only to find, grinding wheels and connection issues and all kinds of other things. And the reasons are irrelevant at this point in time, but it's locals, which is where we broadcast it, got confused between the actual connection with Senator Moreno and the phone. For lack of, again, because the details aren't important, it got confused as far as which was supposed to be broadcasting. So we had a little bit of a glitch there, and the folks who were in the chat asking the questions of the senator during the town hall could not hear his responses, weren't even sure if their questions were being read to the senator by me. So like I said, best advice I can give you if you were trying to be a part of that last night. First of all, thank you for your patience. Sometimes tech just sucks and gets the best of us. But most of all, watch it. It's available to you, again, on the Locals channel. Don't do it right now because I want you to be with us today. We got Kirsanow coming up in an hour, longest serving commissioner in the history of the United States Commission on Civil Rights. Peter Kirsanow will be live at 8 o'clock. I've got another guest coming up here in about 20 minutes at 7:30, which I'll explain in a moment. So after the live show today, after 9 o'clock, whenever you want, go ahead and watch the Moreno Hour from last night, because I think he answered a lot of really, really important questions. One of which, by the way, I'm going to dive into right off the rip here. One of which is about Virginia, excuse me. One of the situations in Virginia is just mind-blowing. You know the redistricting fight. This is largely what Kirsten and I are going to talk about coming up at 8 o'clock. I need to get a sound effect or something to cover up the early morning coughs. Anyway, it's simply mind-blowing. You know about the redistricting wars, and you know about the Supreme Court decision with Louisiana versus Calais that was decided just last week. And now the left is just in an absolute frenzy. Alabama, by the way, is the latest too. Do I have that story here? Alabama is moving on this now too. Yeah, here it is. The Supreme Court in the decision with Louisiana has completely opened the door for Alabama to toss their completely rigged and unfair electoral maps, the district maps. It could take the Alabama congressional delegation from 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats to 7 Republicans and 0 Democrats. Would it be inappropriate of me to ask the infamous question? Can you dig it? No, I want the whole question. But yes, I can dig it. I don't know why Cyrus continues to give me problems, but there we go. And you know what? I'll feel bad about this at some point in time. I'll feel bad about all of the Democrats not having a Democrat-leaning district in a red state. The moment the Democrats apologize for having literally 0 Republicans in multiple states, they have never seen it as a problem. As a matter of fact, hey, Dylan, pull up my Facebook page. Pull up my Facebook page. Yesterday, I posted, it's like the second one down, not the Bob France page, but the Strictly Speaking page, and throw that little meme up there because it is exactly what I'm talking about right now. You hunt that down, and I'll finish this part of the story. I will feel bad when they express some sort of regret or remorse for that. I mean, I read you a list a couple of days ago, last week. I read you a list of 9 Democrat states, 9 blue states, in which Republicans held an average of 42% of the registered voters there. 42%. That's pretty damn significant. That means if you're just looking at it, okay, you found it, Dylan, pop it up there. It's a meme, but it's damn right, right? To the left, what you see up there and all of that blue, that's saving our democracy. No Republican representation. And then, because that's up in the Northeast, that's up in New England states and in the Eastern Seaboard. And then you look on the right side there, all of that red stuff in the South, that's fascism because it's too much red. It's too many red-leaning districts, too many red-leaning states. So that's fascism. But when they do it, it's saving our democracy. Thank you, Dylan. To which I say, politely, my ass. All right. I will feel bad about, for example, what Florida just did and what Louisiana is doing and what Alabama, which I'll get back to the story here in a moment, it's going to go from 4-3 to 7-0. I'll feel bad about that at some point. I swear I will. When the Democrats express some sort of like I said, regret for what I just described. Oh, I was trying to get to the numbers. 9 states. I remember last week giving you these details. 9 states, including 7 from the Northeast, and then I think New Mexico was one, and another one that was not kind of contiguous with the Northeast. But 9 states with Republican voters being an average of 42%. And if you break that down to just like out of every 10, there are 6 Democrats and 4 Republicans in those states. Okay. But yet the way the gerrymandered maps were drawn, Democrats had 121 left-leaning districts in those 7 states, Republicans 21. Okay? You make that fair for me, and then I'll feel bad about the fact that we're kind of responding in some of these states in which, quite frankly, there is not very much Democrat, not 42% Democrat voter representation, to the point where they deserve to have a 6-4, state in terms of leaning districts. So in Alabama, and they're just livid over this now. The Supreme Court Monday cleared a path. This is in the New York Times, so take it for what it's worth, the way it's worded. The Supreme Court on Monday cleared a path for Alabama to use a new voting map for the midterm elections, a victory for Republicans and another sign of the significance of the court's recent decision narrowing the Voting Rights Act. So again, that's how the New York Times wants to frame this. It narrowed the Voting Rights Act. Therefore, it was racist in its intent or its outcome, because the Voting Rights Act was intended to give Black people more access to the ballot. Well, and the Voting Rights Act did its job in that regard. What the Supreme Court just did was its job, which is to say you cannot draw districts based on the race of the voters. That cannot happen. They're right, obviously, and the left doesn't like that fact. So that's how they frame it. But the 1-paragraph order involved a pending petition before the court by Alabama lawmakers who challenged the state's current congressional map, which includes 2 majority Black districts that both elected Democrats to Congress in 2024. The Supreme Court's decision will send the case back to a lower court judge to reconsider the legality of the Alabama map in light of the court's recent decision dealing a blow to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a landmark civil rights era law. That new map would include only 1 majority Black district instead of 2 in the current map. And I'll stop right there and say that's 1 too many. Because guess what? Black people think. Shock. Black people think, and they can decide on their own what they want to do. Stop just assuming that a Black vote is a Democrat vote. Have they historically been so? Yes. Should maps or district maps be drawn based on that? No, because you are essentially trying to tell Black people how they have to vote. It's insulting. It's denigrating. It is wrong. It is also fundamentally racist. Anything that is racially discriminatory is racist. All right? And the idea, and I talked about this with Marino last night about Tennessee. That's another one. I'll feel bad about Tennessee, which is kind of 9-1 right now in terms of right or Republican leaning districts. There's only 1 district in Tennessee that leans blue, and that involves Memphis. Memphis is a very high Black population city. And that district that was drawn there, and it's not like a normal shape. It is still snaked to bring in more Black representation in there, in the expectation that Black people will then vote for a Black representative and they'll have their quote unquote representation in the Congress. But here's the kicker. And Marino and I talked about this last night. Here's the kicker. The representative in that district is a white Democrat. The Republican challenger, a Black woman. You find how funny this is? They're saying, oh, this is outrageous. They're trying to literally wipe out Black representation in Congress from the state of Tennessee. Except for the fact that the Black or the Republican candidate in that newly drawn district is Black. They would rather have a white Democrat than a Black Republican. And yet they're telling us that we have to be able to be allowed to draw race, I won't say racist, but race specific maps inclusive of the Black community. It's like Virginia. We talked about this at length too. And again, Bernie Moreno asked, I'm telling you right now, unfiltered folks, paid supporters, you've got to watch last night's town hall. He gave us a lot of really important information, a lot of juice, okay? We talked about Virginia also, because Virginia, they are so livid, the Democrats, at what happened in Virginia. In a case, just brief refresher, a few weeks ago, in the Virginia primary, they voted in that state, which was, by the way, 11 districts, 6 of them Democrat leaning, 5 of them Republican leaning. Why? Because that's kind of the representation of the two parties, registered voters in the state of Virginia. It's about 6-5. It's percentage wise, right? But the Democrats under white Governor Abigail Spanberger put a ridiculous issue on the ballot asking Virginians if they want fair elections. Duh, what kind of a question is that? But then they rigged the language of the voting, for that referendum to say, if you vote yes, you want fair representation. And that means you want to redraw the maps to basically cancel out all the Republicans. And if you vote no, then you clearly don't want free elections and fair elections, because that's actually going to keep it at 6-5. So the point is, they completely rigged a referendum, and it went from a 6-5 state to a 10-1, 10 Democrat districts, 1 Republican district in a state that is nearly 50% Republican, right? So the Virginia Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, took that up on a challenge and immediately came back and said, yeah, no, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. And holy shish, did the Democrats lose their freaking minds. And you know what they did? Here's another story. I know I'm kind of bebopping back and forth between Alabama and Virginia now, with a taste of Tennessee and a little bit of Louisiana in it as well. But the New York Times reported that Hack Jeffries, there's never been a better short nickname for Hakeem than Hack for this guy, Hack Jeffries and top Democrats in D.C. are considering asking Virginia legislators and Governor Spanberger to pass legislation to retire the entire Virginia Supreme Court. Just kick them all out, because they voted to go by the Constitution of their state and with the flavor of the Constitution of the United States, to not let them take a 6-5 state and make it a 10-1 state. Especially based on a referendum that was completely misworded and misleading and rigged. The conversation reflected the desperation and fury that have gripped the party after the state Supreme Court struck down a favorable map that had been ratified by voters. Again, New York Times speak. The most dramatic idea they discussed, which would involve an unusual gambit to replace the entire Supreme Court with a goal of reinstating their gerrymandered map, drew mixed reactions on the call, and the people, or said the people, it was not clear that it would even be a viable or palatable option for Governor Spanberger and the Democrats in the Virginia General Assembly. But that's how desperate they are. So I asked Moreno last night, Senator Bernie Moreno, in our private town hall, can they do that? I'm not obviously well versed in Virginia state law or the specifics of the Virginia State Supreme Court. Hell, I don't know if I would know that answer for the Ohio State Supreme Court. Is it possible just to go in and replace the entire Supreme Court? How can that be? And Senator Moreno's answer was, yes, it is. The Virginia one. I said, how? And he said, all they have to do, I was blown away by this. All they have to do is vote in the assembly to institute an age requirement to serve on the Virginia State Supreme Court. Okay? They can make the age requirement 54. Anyone over 54 has to be retired from the court. You can't serve once you turn 54, is what Senator Moreno told me. Well, guess what? Every single member of the Virginia State Supreme Court is over 54. So they institute that requirement. It automatically removes the sitting Supreme Court justices in that state. And then the governor gets to replace them all by appointment, and appoints a whole bunch of under 54 left-wing lunatics who will say, oh yeah, that map, that thing was fine. What they did there in that state referendum, it was the will of the people. That's fine. 10-1 is just A-okay. That's how batsh-ish crazy these people have become. So when they're acting like that about Virginia, and when they're acting like that, oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot about the other part of Virginia. And Senator Moreno brought this up too. Who's the governor now? Just won their one election to Virginia as the Virginia governor. Abigail Spanberger, a white woman. The Democrats who are complaining that blacks should have far more representation in the state of Virginia rejected the only black candidate that was in the race, a Republican named Winsome Sears. But they're telling us how important it is to get black people, black leaders, black elected officials to represent the black constituency of the state of Virginia. Yet they denigrated and demeaned and attacked the only black candidate in the race. Why? Because it was about ideology, not race. It's about the fact that she was a Republican. They'd rather have a white leftist lunatic like Abigail Spanberger, who ran as a moderate and then immediately upon winning went into straight up communist mode. They'd rather have a white far leftist like Abigail Spanberger than a black Republican governor like Winsome Sears. So again, you can't write it. You can't make it up. You can't even dream this crap. Seriously, you'd wake up going, what the hell is my brain doing right now making up that fancy crap? So Winsome Sears, like I said, did not win. They've got their white communist-ish governor, and now they're complaining that black people don't have enough representation in the state. So that's the bottom line here that we're getting to is the Republicans are making moves to kind of counter the leftist, gerrymandered Republicans not welcome maps. Like I said, at least 9 different states in so many districts. I showed you that map, or I had Dylan show you that map. Most of that up in the Northeast. All of those districts, even though there is around 42% combined, or average, I should say, on average, about 42% Republican representation, or excuse me, Republican voters, they got next to nothing in terms of representation. So the Democrats never had a problem with that. That's fundamental democracy, baby. The Republicans responding in kind in Louisiana, in Tennessee, in Alabama, in Virginia, while the state Supreme Court in Virginia striking that nonsense down, in Texas. The fact that the Republicans are responding in kind is fascism, according to the lunatics. So that's just where we are. So we're going to get into that in more depth, and not from me, but from Kirsanow. And then of course Alabama. So I started this whole thing. The new map in Alabama would include only one majority black district instead of the 2 on the current map. Kay Ivey, the Republican governor, signed off on legislation that would allow for new House primaries should the state be allowed to use a different congressional map. The map was first approved in 2023 based on a court order to draw district lines that allowed for a second majority black district, which is what the Supreme Court just said is absolutely 100% unconstitutional. State Attorney General Steve Marshall said, for too long, unelected federal judges have had more say over Alabama's elections than Alabama's voters. That ended today. My job is to put the legislature in position to draw a map that favors Republicans 7-0. Done. Again, ordinarily, I would say that's 7-0, but the hell with them. The moment they express some regret and, moreover, an inclination to fix it in the all blue states and with all of their blue districts, then I'll worry about what happened there. All right. It is coming up on 7:30, and we're going to shift gears here into a local story right after I remind you about AFP, our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Ohio. This episode is brought to you in part by AFP and the Buckeye Blueprint. Go to the website, buckeyeblueprint.com, and you will see just a ton of information about how AFP Ohio is trying to guide policy, not politics, but policy, to make the state of Ohio the leader in the country that it should be in all of these crucial areas. We're in the 30s, around 39 in most of them, in all of these areas. How the hell is education in the state of Ohio 39th best in the country? How in the hell is, with all of the resources we have, for crying out loud, including a giant lake, how on earth are we in the 30s in terms of energy abundance? It doesn't make any sense. So AFP Ohio, Americans for Prosperity Ohio, are working hard to advance those 4 keys, as you see on your screen: economic opportunity, education freedom, energy abundance, and yes, government accountability. And it all starts at the local level. How can you be involved in your locality? And the answer is volunteer. Volunteer for what? go to the website. We started there and I'll finish there. Go to buckeyeblueprint.com and you will see exactly what it takes to volunteer. You can reach out to AFP Ohio and ask them what you can do, how you can get involved, where there's a chapter, and so forth, where you can start one. So if you are truly a believer in making Ohio the best it can be, and Ohio's a red state that could be a lot redder. It's a red state, but it's rhino red, which makes it kind of hot pink instead of deep, dark blood red, which is what it should be in a state with this many conservatives. We just need to flex our power, and we need to partner with great groups like AFP Ohio. So please go to buckeyeblueprint.com, support and join the movement and support AFP. And thank you to AFP Ohio for being a foundational partner of Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. Tremendous stuff. All right. So I want to pivot now. It is 7:30. For those watching on playback or in replay, I guess it doesn't matter what time it is for you. But it is time for me to get back into a story that we told you a little bit about yesterday. I want to put the placeholder screenshot that I had up here, the little AI generation. Take a look at that left side. You recognize that profile? Yeah, you saw him on this show, and you saw him screaming and being completely off the chains. He's just completely unhinged in his rabid hatred for Vivek Ramaswamy. That's the guy that lost 88 out of 88 counties in the Ohio governor's race in the primary last Tuesday. 83 to 17% was the final total, I believe. And the question asked above his face or next to his face there is a really interesting one. Did this clown, that's my word, run for governor just to pad his click count and his follower count? His staff says yes. These staff members say that's exactly what he did, and they have a big time problem with it. Dylan, if you would put up on the screen, please. This would be number 3. Go ahead and put number 3 up on the screen before we bring in our guest. There we go. Oh, you and your damn dark mode. I can't read your dark mode. You got to get out of that and put your light mode up there on your computer. That's really, really hard to see. At any rate, what you see there is a post on X, used to be called tweets, I suppose, from somebody named Jacob Tilley, who said he's a former regional director for the Putsch campaign here. And he said at the very beginning, this man lied to every voter he had and every member of the campaign staff. That's pretty bold and that's pretty strong. So I read that entire thing and a couple of others, and thank you, Dylan. And I reached out to Jacob Tilley and I said, hey, what the hell happened? What are you talking about? And we chatted for just a little while on Saturday, and I invited him to come on this program and explain what he is saying was going on in the Casey Putsch campaign. And enough of it was disturbing for me to say, let's chat about this and bring it to light. So I want to bring in Jacob Tilley now to our program, as you just saw and read, former staffer for the Casey Putsch campaign for governor. And Jacob, thanks for being with us. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on this morning. I wish it was under different circumstances, but it's great to be here nonetheless.
It's good to have you. And I agree. I wish the circumstances were different too. Jacob, URG, and I should know what school that is, but I don't. What's URG?
That'd be the University of Rio Grande down near Gallipolis.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was trying to figure it out. I know we talked about you had class yesterday. That's why you couldn't come on yesterday. And okay, he's in college. He's 19, and then I saw URG. You're also leader of the Turning Point chapter on that campus. And I was trying to figure out, what is URG? I still didn't figure it out. So that's awesome. And I'm going to ask you about Turning Point before we're done with this, by the way.
Okay.
Let's get into your tweet and your post, if you will, and talk about this. But before we get into the specifics, you were the regional vice president. Was it vice president or vice director? What was the title?
Regional director.
Regional director for the Casey Putsch campaign down in your area. And I want to know why. Tell me how you got connected with the Casey Putsch for Governor campaign and why it is that you decided that's where you wanted to devote your time and energy.
So I got started in politics back when I was in my freshman year of high school. I worked the Jane Timken for Ohio campaign. Gained a lot of experience doing that. During that time, I had more doors knocked and phone calls made than any intern in the state. And so when I saw that Casey was running, I'm like, hey, I'm a TPUSA president. I've worked a campaign before. I really don't like Vivek. Now, I know you may have a different opinion on that, but that was my reason for joining the Putsch campaign. It wasn't about Casey. He was an alternative, and I believe that alternative deserved a voice, and the people of Ohio deserved a choice. So I had a meeting with Casey and George, who you saw online. George at one time was Casey's George Roche was Casey's campaign manager. They liked my experience. They liked what I brought to the table. So I became the Southeast director. I can't say it wasn't a great time on the campaign, getting to work with my fellow volunteers and directors. But as you've noted, there were definitely some problems.
Right. Okay. So let's get into some of the problems here. And as I look at that message that you put out there, you spoke of 2 emergency meetings that you had with Casey, both times because, quote, things were falling apart with the team. During the first meeting, he cussed me out and finally admitted to what we all suspected. Rather than read that part, I want you to tell me that part and tell me in more detail. What did he say? What did you all suspect that he finally admitted?
There were a lot of tensions brewing after we had got signatures done to get Casey on the ballot. Between the Trump crash out, the numerous posts about Vivek, which quite frankly crossed the line for all political reasons. And Casey told us in our first emergency meeting, as well as the second, that he had no intentions of winning. And this wasn't I'm just here to crush the establishment type of way. It was, I didn't do this to win. I didn't even do it to give the people of Ohio a voice. I personally believe that it was to boost his social media career. He went from under 5,000 followers on X to over 50-some thousand. And he's definitely gained a bit of a voice with over 120,000 votes in the primary.
Yeah, well, that sounds about right. But let's go back to that now. You said you suspected that he did this not to, like you said, give the people another option, even though he knew he wasn't going to win. It wasn't like that. It wasn't some sort of a heroic, we have to do something to change the process here, as you described. It wasn't for that. It was for personal reasons, for personal benefit, gain, if you will, monetization, bigger platform, more people, more money, and so on and so forth. He's made his entire career. The only reason anybody knew his name is because of his very popular YouTube channel. So you said you suspect that's what it was. What do you base that on?
So while we were gathering signatures, when the campaign first started, we had a campaign manager who Casey was beginning to disagree with. I had my own complaints. We went the first 2-3 weeks of the campaign without collecting a single signature. Nobody in the campaign knew if it had to be a registered Republican who went around collecting signatures. We didn't know who could sign the signature ballot. Stuff that should have been figured out well before this campaign was launched was things that nobody even had a clue. So we regional directors my deputy director, actually, in the Southeast. I'll go without naming him unless he wants to name himself. But
okay,
he had searched the Ohio Revised Code and found out that anyone, as long as you're not a registered Democrat, could circulate petitions. So we had a fight for another week after that about whether or not that was true. So it led to that campaign director being fired. I don't think it went over very well with Casey. So we brought in a new guy. We started collecting signatures, and it was still a huge mess. As I mentioned in a later post, there was one time that leader was blackout drunk. I had to take over for his job for the night, and this was about a week before signatures were due, and we didn't have enough yet. And that stuff started piling up. After the signatures were collected, we had barely got enough. Casey started to lash out at different volunteers, at different directors, even Kim herself. And it eventually just reached a breaking point one night where all of us directors told Casey, we need to have a meeting now. because we were debating leaving, and we wanted to hear it from the man himself. So we straight up asked him, "Are you in this to win?" And his answer was exactly as I stated, "No, I am not in this to win."
Give me the time frame again here. You were talking about this is right before signatures were due and you didn't have enough. When was that?
So this would have been early February, late January. This would have been said, what Casey said would have been in the middle of February after signatures had been collected. So this is after he'd appeared on the ballot, was getting massive donations.
Okay. So it's important here because you said we kicked around the idea of walking. We thought about leaving, but you didn't. Tell me why. You're a believer in, I get it. And you're right. We disagree on Casey's merits, and we disagree probably on Vivek Ramaswamy. In fact, not probably, because you said you don't like him, which is totally your prerogative. We also disagree on Jane Timken, by the way. She was like dead last on my choice of Senate candidates, and that's okay too. But you are obviously a principled guy. You are, got into politics so early as a freshman in high school, and God love you for it. That's fantastic. But tell me, Jacob, why you didn't walk? You heard the guy you're volunteering for say that, no, I'm not in this to win. At that point in time, he's taken money. He's collecting money from donors who expect him to try to win. And you know that he's not. He's doing it under fraudulent circumstances at that point in time, or with fraudulent intentions. So tell me why you and the other staffers said, we're going to stick. We're instead of walking on that news, we're going to stay. Why?
After that meeting, we had a meeting with the boss that I had mentioned, as well as some of the other upper level staffers that were directly close to Casey.
Mm-hmm.
And they told us that he was just getting stressed. He didn't really mean that. Casey's in this fully to win. And we half bought it. We thought, what if we start getting some polling results? What if we start getting some more donations? What if we start seeing more progress than what we've already seen? Maybe Casey will have a better attitude towards this entire campaign. So we kept pushing another few weeks, and eventually we started to become cut off. We lost our volunteer contacts. We couldn't contact any volunteers that weren't already on the campaign. We had close to 1,000 people volunteer for the campaign to either have a sign or get out there and knock doors. And I think we may have had maybe 10 in total actually working the campaign, because we weren't allowed to call them. We weren't allowed to schedule events anymore. We had that privilege taken from us.
What? Don't gloss over that. What's that all about? Why were you not allowed to call? Why were you not allowed to make use of the volunteers and the resources that you guys had marshaled together for this?
We were never given a reason. We were just told it wasn't our responsibility anymore. People were supposedly brought on for it, which we never seen. I mean, Casey, there was a point where Casey was having about 2 events every week at one point, which still wasn't enough for a gubernatorial candidate, but it was better than what he was doing. And eventually that just got completely cut off. There weren't any more events. There weren't any more volunteers being brought on. And we were told that it wasn't for us to worry about, to trust the plan. Casey knew what he was doing. We were never given a reason.
So again, fair answer as to why you didn't walk the first time he said that. Oh, he was just in a heated moment. Yeah, he was frustrated. He didn't mean that. Of course, he's in it to win it. But then you're starting to see things actually, play out that way. He's not trying to win because he's not letting us do our jobs as volunteers. We're not allowed to call people, not allowed to, get these campaign activities together. He's not scheduling events. He's not going out there and trying to, meet with the people and earn their votes. So again, you had to have been thinking, right, that this isn't a real campaign. People are donating their hard-earned money to something that is not real, right? Does that come into your head at some point?
Yeah, it did. It was about 2 weeks after the first meeting. So it didn't take very long for things to pile up. And we had a second emergency meeting with Casey, and he really lost it on us that time. He said, I've already been over this with you guys. I don't want to do it again. I'm not in this to win. Either do your damn jobs or get off the campaign. So we left. At least most of us did. I don't even know who was left at that point. I think it might have been one regional director. Other than that, we all quit. The reason we didn't speak out is we were under NDA until the day after the election, which is when we all decided to speak out, at least me and George.
Um, Jacob, tell me a little bit more about the campaign director, George Roosh. You know, because there's a post that he made as well, talking about all of this. And I don't know if you guys have huddled at all since all of this. What is his take on all of this right now? And what is if you guys have talked, what is your goal? What do you want to see happen now?
No, George was a very intelligent guy when I first met him. That was my first impression.
Okay.
I really didn't get to know much about him until we had our first in-person campaign where everyone had come, because we have guys across state lines. You know, not everybody could be at every event. So that was the first time I'd met George in person, and that would have been in January, early February, right after signatures had been turned in. I got to talk to him. He was the policy guy for the campaign after he had been replaced as campaign director.
Mm-hmm.
There was no reason other than distance, but I got to talk to him, get to see some of the ideas on the policy campaign, which in its own self was a problem because most of the regional directors and volunteers couldn't even know what the policy was that we were pushing. There was a few selected group of individuals who had, like a 50-page document of everything they wanted to implement for Ohio. We weren't allowed to see that. But George had also become extremely dissatisfied with the campaign and believed there was a lot of wrongdoing. So he left, I think it was maybe 1 or 2 days after we'd had the first meeting with Casey about the issue. And I hadn't talked to him until last week after we had both came forward with our stories. We still haven't talked very much, haven't had a phone call other than a few text messages here or there. But everything that George has said, I would personally agree with, and I have no reason to doubt him. When it comes to the Trump campaign reaching out an olive branch, I personally have no intel in that. I don't know if that's true or not, but like I said, I don't have any reason to doubt George.
Okay. It's funny. I was just looking at the comments in our chat, live chat that's going on here, and somebody just said Jacob's description of Casey is exactly what we saw in this show, and I concur. When I had him on in late January, he was just so all over the place when it comes to policy ideas. He didn't really have any. As a matter of fact, I asked him his thoughts on the Ohio budget, and he admitted he hadn't even seen it. He said there's plenty of time for that. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you are literally declaring a run for governor to run a state with $100 billion budget per year. And you're talking about, you haven't seen it yet? Or I'm sorry, not 100 billion, a billion. You haven't seen it yet? What do you mean? And every question that I asked him about policy matters, he just immediately reverted back to how awful Vivek was and how much it is dirty, no good, blah, 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 anchor baby this and all kinds of other slurs and things like that was. So I'm looking for policy, and I'm looking for some reason why anybody would want him to run one of, what is Ohio, about the 10th or 11th largest state by population in the country. I'm looking for a reason why. I got nothing. It sounds like you got the same thing. It sounds like you guys, you got no substance, you got no policy, you got no ideas what's going on. So again, I ask, why volunteer for this guy who's literally bringing nothing to the table? Not late to the table, but never to the table, according to what you described. In fact, things trailed off the further you got in the process.
It was the alternative. I mean, he was the alternative to Vivek. It was kind of a similar situation as to why I voted for Trump. I like the policies, not too fond of the man himself. Of course, I might differ on that opinion.
But you just said that he didn't really articulate any policies. So, I don't understand that. Trump did. Trump articulated policies. Even if you don't like the man, you like the policies. Okay. But Casey didn't have any policies. He was so unprepared on virtually every issue that I interviewed him on and that I've seen from him in other places on. So again, I'm just trying to figure out at what point do you say, or rather, why do you say this is my alternative to Vivek Ramaswamy? Because of what? What policy issues? What did he say that had you like, all right, I want to put my time and effort in with this guy?
It really wasn't anything that Casey had said. It was the fact that he was a Christian. He's the only Christian in the race. And to me, that matters. I don't think anyone other than a Christian should be a representative in the United States. I think that should be, without a doubt, something that we require. I don't think anyone other than a Christian should be running for office. And that was the main reason. I mean, it was who he was, not what he believed. or necessarily what he was saying he believed or what he was doing.
That's an interesting admission that you just made, and I did not know that. And thank you for the honesty with it. Here's a hard follow-up, though. Are you sure he's a Christian?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Did he, at any point in time during the campaign that you were working with him, act like a Christian? Because what I heard was just defamation and racism and bigotry and all of the things that he said about Vivek Ramaswamy. His actions, his anger, his rage, his treatment of staff, like you just described, and what was going on here. Because Christian has to be more than just a name, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I fully agree with most of those things. And I mean, it came down to the fact that we really didn't see most of that until after signatures had been collected, because we were the guys getting Casey on the ballot. If he was rude to us then, if he went off on us, if he started showing his true colors before signatures had been turned in, you got no one to collect those. And that's immediately after is when we started having our privileges revoked. We couldn't schedule events. We weren't allowed to contact volunteers. And that's when we started having the arguments with Casey, when he started going off on us. Mm-hmm. And it basically became a one-man show.
Okay. So just real quick, this is not really germane to our conversation about what Casey Putsch did and whether or not maybe he may have broken any laws, campaign finance laws, by collecting money without the purpose of actually trying to win, which is what the money was donated for. I'll ask that one in a moment. But just since we're talking about the Christianity thing, is that the primary reason you want an alternative to Vivek? Was it just his Hinduism, or was there more than that?
It was his Hinduism, and he's not a heritage American. We can have disagreements on immigration, but when this country was founded, it was by Europeans, and later on it was by freed African Americans, as well as natives. And I believe that those three groups should be the ones that are governing, not just Ohio, but the entire United States.
What is your opinion of Senator Moreno?
I think he's one of the better representatives in Congress that we have. Not representatives, but people that represent us.
Yeah.
Of course, I just stated what I really believe, but like I said, he's one of the better ones that we have, and for now, I believe that he's the best choice that we have.
I'm not trying to play gotcha here. I mean, I appreciate you coming on here. I'm not trying to play gotcha, but it's just that what you said a moment ago doesn't square, because Bernie Moreno fits none of those categories. He's not a native. He's not from Europe. He's not a freed African-American descendant. He's from South America. He's from Colombia, and he is here, and he is leading, and he is doing a phenomenal job. Does that give you pause a little bit to maybe rethink whether or not somebody not one of those categories you just mentioned should be one of our elected representatives?
No, and I give full respect to your opinion, but I would disagree that he's doing a wonderful job. I said he was one of the best that we have. I couldn't really say that anyone in Congress is doing a wonderful job. Between, the war against Iran, ties with Israel, the fact that we're not limiting immigration like Trump had supposed, we're not having mass remigration, we're really not doing much of the policies that Trump ran on, and nobody in Congress is pushing those. It was more of, we'll do some of it, and then we'll stop. You don't see mass deportations on the news much anymore. The numbers are down. We're not doing enough.
Agreed. Although I just talked to him, Senator Moreno, last night about that being ramped up. Mark Wayne Mullen and Tom Homan basically just made an announcement after some tweaks. We are now coming out harder than ever, and not just on the worst first thing, but all illegals are on the table now. So I think that's going to change. But going back to the point though about Senator Moreno. He's obviously not in charge of that, but he has been a leader in the Senate, even though he's very young in the Senate. He has been a leader in advancing the very policies that Trump represents, the Trump agenda from 2024 that you want to see implemented. I agree with you. Overall, Congress is not doing enough as a body, but individual people are trying to change that. You know what I mean? We're talking about sponsoring legislation. We're talking about leading. Senator Moreno was one of the guys at the forefront to finally get the DHS funding passed to end that stupid partial shutdown. And he's the reason there's going to be a reconciliation bill at the end of this month on the president's desk to fund ICE fully for the next 3.5 years and the CBP to carry out Trump's agenda. So here's this guy born not in the United States, born in Colombia, but who's here advancing the Trump agenda you support. And I guess the reason I'm bringing all that up is to, again, ask you, are you sure you don't want to reconsider a little bit about Vivek Ramaswamy's capability of leading the state? People who are not, and he, by the way, was born here. You know, I mean, his family came here, obviously, from India, but he was born here. But you're talking about heritage Americans. You do see that there are some non-heritage Americans in those three categories you listed that are doing the job. You know, maybe Congress isn't getting it done as a whole, but individuals are doing their level best to get there.
I mean, getting the job done, it's a bit of an overreach for me. Like I said, Moreno is one of the best that we have in the Senate, but it's not enough. And I don't agree with most of the policies that are being pushed. You know, why are 90% of our representatives and senators in Congress funded by AIPAC? Why is a foreign country funding our representatives and senators for election? We wouldn't allow that from Japan. We wouldn't allow that from the UK. Why are we not denationalizing people? Why are we still allowing, mass migration into this country? Why are these things not being done? When I voted for Trump, I kind of wanted him to go against the status quo. I wasn't wanting him to be a dictator by any means, but, I was wanting him to push the limits. I wanted him to be tested in courts. Have we seen that? We've seen him tested in courts, but not for any different reasons than what Obama did or what Biden did. Yeah, Biden had, open borders, but he was still deporting people the same as Trump. And I'm not saying Biden did a good job by any means, but it's that the news media is making a big deal about what Trump is doing when really it's not different than any other president. And if it's not different than any other president, then why does it matter that we voted for Trump? I would vote for Trump today if we had an election, but I disagree with most of what he's doing today, as do most Americans.
That's an interesting perspective. I've only got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to try to fast track the last two questions. Number one is, you mentioned how you feel about Vivek and about heritage Americans, but I want you to compare him now side by side with Amy Acton. You're talking about the important issues to you, and you're talking about Vivek being a Hindu. Amy Acton is not a Hindu. I don't know if she's a Christian, but I do know she is pro-abortion. I do know she is pro-illegal immigration. I do know she is for everything. Put him back on the screen, would you please, Dylan?
No, Amy Acton is Jewish.
She's Jewish. Okay.
So she's also not a Christian.
Okay, that's fine. But my point is, this is now a binary choice. Casey is out, Amy Acton is in, and Vivek Ramaswamy is in. Given the fact that our state needs to have a leader who is competent and qualified, and we have seen what Amy Acton did when she was given too much power in this state 6 years ago, and 5 years ago, and 4 years ago, why would you not get behind Vivek Ramaswamy right now?
Because you're either going to have mass illegal immigration or you're going to have mass legal immigration. It really doesn't matter if we're being replaced, if jobs are being replaced, if the demographics of this country are being replaced. If Christians and white people become a minority, then the very people who founded this country are no longer representative in the same way. Every people on earth are allowed to have their own country, from the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, Africans, South Americans. But yet you see Europe and you see America being flooded with people from all over the country. Yeah, it's great if they want to come here and work. But at a certain point, you have to draw the line even with workers. When does it no longer become America? America is not an idea. It's blood and soil. That's all America has ever been. Europeans, freed slaves, and Native Americans built this country. That will never change. And if we become the minority, then what is there left to preserve?
So are you suggesting that we should cut off all legal immigration, not from Europe? I guess that would be it now, right? Because the natives are already here. Freed African-American descendants are here, and white people are here. So are you suggesting that immigration should be limited to just Europe?
Yes, I am.
That's going to have a word attached to it. And I'm sure you're aware of that, right?
We're way past racism and We're way past racism.
It sounds racist. It does. Like I said,
maybe it does, but that doesn't matter. We're way past terms. We're way past being called names. What it's going to take to save this country and prevent us from total collapse, just like Rome, is drastic measures. That's what it's going to take. Yes, we do need to cut off all legal immigration. We need to denaturalize people and deport them back to the countries that they came from, even if they came here legally. Anchor babies, immigrants, we don't have time for this anymore. You know, you go back to the 60s, white people were over 90% of this country. We're about 56% now. We're going to be a minority. The people who built this country. Even if people want to call it racist, I deserve to have my own country. My people deserve to have their own country. Every other people on this earth have their own country, except for Europeans.
Well, what's Europe?
It's being flooded. You look at how many Muslims are in the UK now. I mean, within 10 years.
I'm well aware. That invasion into particularly Western Europe by the Muslims is extraordinary, and it's dangerous. I completely agree. And I have a huge problem with this massive Muslim migration into the United States as well. We don't disagree on that. But the suggestion that the United States should only be comprised of natives, European immigrants only, and then, the descendants of freed blacks, you're suggesting nobody else should be able to come to this country from other places is like I said, it's kind of an extremist view. So is that the reason why? Let me ask you point blank. Are you going to vote in November? Are you going to vote for Vivek Ramaswamy, or are you going to vote for Amy Acton?
I will not be voting. I could not bring myself to vote for either. No, I'm definitely not a groyper. That may have crossed your mind, but
it did. It did. Yeah, it did.
I do share some of Nick's views, but accelerationism is not one of them. Our generation is extremely, compared to previous generations, far right. Trump won the youth vote with white males, with males in general from Gen Z. And you look at how many viewers Nick gets every night. Some of his views I completely disagree with, but you can't denote that there is a movement among the younger generations of, the far right. It's what we believe. It's what we want. We believe that we've been lied to in parts of history. We believe that there's really only a few solutions, and we're running out of democratic options. We have to cut off the mass funnel of migrants into our country. We have to take our country back.
Jacob, what about, and by the way, I'm not trying to start a fight with you in any way, and I appreciate you coming on. You're 19 years old, and you're idealistic, and you worked for Casey Putsch, and this was the start of the conversation, and I'll end it with that in a second. But what about what you just said was non-groyper? You literally sound like you are just quoting Nick Fuentes' talking points.
I don't agree with accelerationism. I mean, listen, that would really be the only thing I do disagree with Nick on, other than some of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, which is quite frankly weird. But yeah, that would really be the only two talking points that I do disagree with him on. As with most young men that I know, even my non-friends, even people that I've talked to, oh yeah, I see Nick's clips on Instagram. I agree with a lot of that. The fact is that our generations are a lot different in their political ideologies. We don't really agree with mass migration. And I mean, we have poll numbers to support that.
Yeah, I see that. I can see that in your generation. And a lot of that, quite frankly, is troubling because I believe in legal mass migration, or legal migration, but not mass migration, legal based on 100% merit. What do you bring to the country? And this is what I think my generation and most generations kind of believe. What do you bring to the country? I don't care where you came from. What are you bringing? What skill set are you bringing? What talent are you bringing? Are you going to swear allegiance to the United States? What's funny? Since we were talking about Senator Moreno, and I told you he's from Colombia, so he doesn't fit your nativist viewpoint there, your heritage American viewpoint there. Senator Moreno is the one who is sponsoring legislation to ban dual citizenship, that if you come to this country from another country, you have to swear your allegiance only to the United States and renounce your citizenship to your home country. If that's not American and American heritage, I don't know what is.
Randy Fine himself is also co-sponsoring that bill. At least he's in support of it. Yeah. Even though he holds a passport for Israel because he's Jewish. It doesn't really matter. It's all performative. If Randy Fine himself is supporting that bill, No, no, because him himself is basically a dual citizen. I mean, he openly has an Israeli flag in his office.
Mm-hmm.
He openly supports Israel, says that we should do everything that we can to support Israel. Ted Cruz himself said, I came into office to do nothing but support Israel. I mean, at what point do you draw the line there? At what point do we cut ties with Israel for killing children in Iran? Once again, I don't agree with the Iranian regime, but we can't pick sides here and accuse one side of doing something when both sides are doing it.
Well, we're gonna have to end our conversation here because of time and because of the fact that I could get into a whole lot of things that you just said that are not accurate, but I don't want to do that right now. What I do want to close with is what we started with, and that is the Casey Putsch question. Do you believe, and it's a question, not a suggestion, do you believe that he collected money from donors, Jacob, illegally? Under the pretense of running for an election that he had no intention of winning, just so that he could, as he said, advance his social media following?
That is a difficult question in the fact that I believe what he did was morally wrong. I don't know if it crossed the line into illegalities because I'm not entirely sure how you would even prove that. But if you could, yes, I do believe that what he did was illegal. And I do believe that he should be punished by that. Not for any personal reasons, but because he took money from the people of Ohio and lied to them.
That's a fair answer. That's all I'm looking for, is just kind of an idea from somebody who was in the room with him when he said these things multiple times, and that you and some of your fellow staffers have come to the realization he never intended to become the governor. All he wanted to do was advance his own career, and that's a problem. So all of our disagreements on many of the things in between the conversation, I appreciate especially what you talked about at the beginning and your position on that. That's why I asked you to come on. So Jacob Tilley, thank you for doing that, and I appreciate your attention this morning.
Thank you, Bob. It was great speaking with you as well, even with the disagreements. But that's what politics are all about, compromise. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you, Jacob. All right, there you go. That's, again, Jacob Tilley. He was the regional director, or a regional director for the Casey Putsch for governor campaign. All right, I've got somebody else waiting in the wings here, but before I get to him, I want to remind you about our partners in this endeavor, including our friend Mark King, Keeping Medicare Simple. Mark is just the gold standard in Northeast Ohio. When you've been doing something for nearly 40 years, you're doing it right. He started this business almost 4 decades ago, helping people understand Medicaid, or Medicare rather, and getting signed up for the most benefits that they can receive for the least amount of cost. That's what it is. Medicare is confusing. It's complex by design. It's hard for people to understand what the different parts are and what their options are. That's where Mark comes in. He's been keeping it simple, like I said, for almost 4 decades. The website is simple too. Follow it. It's keepingmedicaresimple.com. Bookmark that and take a look at it when you get an opportunity. Keepingmedicaresimple.com. Many of your questions will be answered right there. But for the ones that aren't, well, there's a phone number. It's on your screen. 440-832-8936. If you are turning 65 this year and aging into Medicare for the first time, call Mark. He's going to help you get ready for that. If you're already in Medicare, call Mark. Find out if you're in the best plan for you, and then find out when you might be able to change it. That's how this whole thing works. And you know what? When you call Mark, when you sit down with Mark, Mark is going to ask you for $0 because there's no fee. All right. Mark doesn't charge you to give you advice on this. You need to understand that. And he does not care which plan you choose as long as it's the right plan for you. Call 440-832-8936. Mark King keeps Medicare simple. I trust him, and you should too. All right. He's sitting there waiting patiently in the green room. We've lost 9 of his minutes, and I know he's going to make up for every single one of them. He is, of course, our friend, the longest serving commissioner in the history of the United States Commission on Civil Rights, Peter Kirsanow. Welcome back, Pete. How are you, sir?
Hey, Bob, doing well. How about yourself?
Good. A lot of stuff has happened since the last time we spoke, including the Ohio primaries. They happened. Now we know who is where and where, what the matchups are, and we're going to get your thoughts on that. We've got a whole lot of redistricting battles now because of some Supreme Court decisions, both the Supreme Court decision at the U.S. level and the one at the Virginia state level that may change the games everywhere. So we've got a lot to dive into this morning. But Peter, those are the things that I told you we were going to talk about, and we will. but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you for an opinion. I know you were in the green room for a few minutes there at the end of my conversation with one of Casey Putsch's staffers, former staffers, who's kind of blowing the whistle on Putsch now, saying that he may have committed some fraud by not intending to win that race, but simply to grow his online profile. But the young man that I was just speaking with, who was one of his staffers, said some pretty outlandish things as far as I'm concerned. I wondered if you had any response to his comments.
Yeah, in all fairness, he's a young man.
Yes,
Young
that's
men
why
aren't
I
always.
had the grace with him that I did too. His youth.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I'm not going to speak for your audience, but I've met so many of them and have a intuitive sense about some of them. I think they probably give them a little bit of grace too, but disagree with them on a number of matters. And the whole thing with respect to Israel and everything. There is a strain, unfortunately, and well, fortunately, it's very, very small, at least based on my experience on this. A very small strain among some young white men who have a real problem with all number of things. Israel, you name it. I don't know what it is, but I'll be charitable. He's entitled to his opinion. I think the base of the conservative movement doesn't share them. I think that Donald Trump doesn't share them. I think that most conservative leaders don't share them. But it's an element out there, and there's a reason for that element, and I think that needs to be addressed. I think a lot of people are dissatisfied with much of what's going on in the country, and more importantly, actually in the conservative movement. But I think most of your audience probably finds it interesting, but in terms of, hey, where did this guy come from? But I don't think they share their opinion.
Well, what's troubling for me, Pete, is the old adage of politics make for strange bedfellows.
Yeah.
We've sadly got to get into bed with people of that movement that young man was just representing, because if he sits it out, which he said he will, and if there are thousands or millions who do the same, we're going to lose, because those are people who are going to vote for our side almost all the time. And I don't want to have to get into the bed with that particular movement. That young man, notwithstanding what he said was true about young Christian males, put Trump over the top in 2024. And what they expect is more of what he was articulating there. Only Christians should be allowed to lead or be elected in this country. Only European immigrants should be allowed to come to this country because, the whiteness of the country matters. I mean, we're talking about some really, really dangerous stuff that, Nick Fuentes, who is a noted, Hitler lover and racist, he's very, very, very popular with young men of that generation. I don't want that young generation to be like that. But the alternative is to denounce them, separate from them, have them sit it out, and then we hand the country over to communists and socialists. So we're in a really, really tough spot there.
It's a political dilemma, but I think it's unquestionable that you've got to reject their precepts. We can't simply just ignore what they're saying and say, well, we want their votes. Either they vote, they've got no alternative. Clearly, they cannot vote for the other side. But there's no way in the world I'm going to say, oh yeah, well, their principles, their precepts are acceptable or at least tolerable. They're not. They're horrible. Historically speaking, they've been horrible, and just simply on an objective basis, they're horrible. That doesn't mean that these are horrible individuals. I bet you most of them are very good, upstanding individuals, good patriots, and everything of that nature. But this is a dangerous game you play if you start to absorb these principles, and only for the sake of political expediency, and only for the sake of political expediency, do you accept them. That's what the Democrats do with all of their horrible factions out there. Every single one of them cobbled together that has significant deleterious issues. So we shouldn't be like that. Conservatives shouldn't be like that. And I would suspect that 90% of your viewing audience agrees.
Yeah, I think so too. There's a comment on the chat right now from Big Jake, who says, Peter, you are being too kind. I was 19 once and I never sounded like Jacob.
Yeah, I agree. That I am being too kind, and that's a fault that I have sometimes. My labor opponents wouldn't necessarily say that, but yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, we have to reject that wholesale, as I indicated, and try to persuade these folks who I think are persuadable. They're young men or women, most of them, and I think they're persuadable.
Yeah, it is the young men though that are the ones that we're talking about that
Sure.
overwhelmingly voted for Trump. Which blew me away at the time, and we've talked about that many times since then. Because you would think that coming out of the indoctrinational high schools and
That's
and the ones
precisely why.
in the universities, you would think, well, precisely why what? Go ahead.
I think that's one of the major motivators for why they support a Donald Trump. They're sick of being, for lack of a better term, crapped on. And it's not just young white males, it's males, period. You go to high school and college, males are, viewed as, I don't know, if anything else, expendable. And it's been going on now for at least 2 generations. And there's a lot of alienation, disaffection of especially young white males, but all males. There, black males. I still remember last year when Barack Obama presumed to preach to a bunch of young black males that they must vote for Kamala Harris, otherwise they're not black. And they said, basically, go back home. I'm being very charitable, but that's what they said to him. So I do think that there's an element out there that needs to be addressed, needs to be appealed to, but we have to dissuade them from their more pernicious inclinations. I don't think that I don't want to cast a broad brush, but many of them haven't been around long enough to understand what's important and how you comport yourself in this society.
Yeah, that's fair. And but what I was kind of thinking of is that the brainwashing is more successful in the schools and particularly in the universities. That I thought that the majority of the Gen Zers, male and female, were going to come running from those universities to vote for Kamala because they've been, like I said, they've been brainwashed and indoctrinated. But those who rejected it and found a way to flee from it. Thank goodness they did, because this is the reason we have the result we have. But many of them are the mindset that this young man has. And the difference between Big Jake being 19 and not being like that, me being 19 and not being like that, and you being 19 and not being like that, is none of us had the internet. We didn't have influencers. And that's what people like Nick Fuentes is. He's an influencer. He's online reaching out to these kids in their space where they are. And in my view, corrupting their mind with some pretty shitty thinking, if I may. You know what I mean? And we didn't have that. So there are a lot of people, and there's a lot of strength in numbers when these groypers, as they call themselves, or these individuals find one another and feed off of one another's hate and one another's, completely indefensible ideology that some of them have, pro-Hitler, pro-fascism, etc.
Yeah. And, that doesn't just reside on the right. On the left, they've got their own issues.
Oh, gosh.
On steroids.
Worse.
And I agree with you. The proliferation of media like this and everyone having access to a microphone or a laptop or something, they expand and their views expand and proliferate. And, for individuals, if you are, and I'll say this about all young males, but almost everybody, frankly, at this point, but if you've spent any period of time in high school, and there's a natural tendency to rebel if you're a young person against what authority figures tell you to a certain point. But if you spend any time in your average public school, and I've been in public schools where I speak and sometimes teach a class here and there, you can see how these folks are drowning in, I'll be charitable, political correctness that seems to cast especially white males as villains, as oppressors. And these folks, they're at some point, they're going to say, wait a minute, that's not me. And I'm sick of this crap. And in fact, when I read history books, white males have done a pretty good job of creating this country. We've, for 2 generations at least, denigrated the contributions of white males, elevated the contributions of folks who may have been oppressed, but because of their oppression, didn't have an opportunity to contribute much to society. So you can't say that, somebody was oppressed and yet they created this country. That's absolutely not factually accurate. And I think a lot of those folks, I'm not making excuses for them because their positions in many respects are completely despicable, but you can understand where it comes from. It's the same place that almost anybody else who is, either mildly or severely oppressed comes from. So again, no excuses for them, but I would cut them a little bit of slack and hope that they mature a little bit and join the rest of us in society, remain or be conservative. They're not remaining conservative by taking these pernicious views, but be conservative and understand the value of the United States and your individual human beings.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's not just the conservatism too, but, that young man and many in that group, in that Gen Z generation and in that ideology, it's about Christianity too. He talked about this. Only Christians should be allowed to be elected. Only Christians should be allowed to lead. This is why he's against Vivek Ramaswamy. He's not Christian. He's against any Jewish leaders and so forth. And I think to myself, they're practicing a different Christianity than the one I know.
Right.
Because Christianity is reflected in Christ, hence the name. And that is not what Christ thought. Christ welcomed all people from all, corners of the earth to him, to his Father, to the kingdom and so forth. And that's what it's all about. And he reached out to those. He did not reject those who were not like that. So, and not to mention just some of the attitudes, like I said, very less than Christ-like. And that's again, one of the awkward things we're going to have to deal with right now, Pete. I mean, we're 6 months from the midterms, 6 months from either saving the republic or losing it forever. And that's not hyperbole in any way. As Bernie Moreno said to me last night, we all know what happens in November if we lose. Mm-hmm. They kill the filibuster week 1 on the Senate side, and they start pushing every radical thing that you can imagine up. And if they win in 2028, they'll have somebody to sign them, all of their radical things. So we have to figure out how we navigate these waters. We need all of these people and their votes. We have to convince them not to sit it out. We have to convince them that they're on our side and that we're on their side, despite some of their views being absolutely, abhorrent. So that's a very tough thing to deal with in the next 6 months, Pete.
It is, but I think it's doable. We're not going to be able to persuade all of them, but I think that there is only, for lack of a better term, there's only one other place for them to go, and that one they can't vote for Democrats. There's no way they can vote for Democrats. Do we lose a few of them that will not then vote for Republicans? Yeah, that's true, but I'd rather lose a few that embrace completely toxic views than conform our stance to them just to get votes. That's what Democrats do. And I think that Democrats may be in for a rude awakening. We'll see about that. I'm hopeful that they are, because what we see now, and they're being very transparent about it, is they're going to completely do what Barack Obama has exhorted them to do for a couple of decades now, and that is fundamentally transform this country. When you see what Spangenberger tried to do in Virginia, that should scare the crap out of you, because they're not playing games at all. They want to turn this into a socialist enterprise and forever lock in a Democratic majority.
Yeah, I completely agree, Pete. And speaking of majorities, now let's get into this. This is the biggest issue of the day. It's the biggest issue of this moment, I think, and it's bigger than the war in Iran right now and where that is headed. The Supreme Court's decision last week on Louisiana versus Calais, is that how you say it? Is it Calais or Calais?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it's Calais. With respect to the Voting Rights Act, obviously, it's changing everything. It has changed what Alabama is doing. I don't know if you saw that. Alabama is now they announced yesterday, planning to redraw their map based on the Supreme Court's new ruling that you cannot gerrymander districts specifically for grouping races together. It is unconstitutional. So Alabama could go and become a 7-0 state, 7 Republican-leaning districts, 0 Democrat districts. Tennessee, Memphis is the only blue-ish district, and they had to gerrymander that one to make it blue. But now that one is going to be wiped out. Tennessee could be a 10-0 state in terms of Republicans leading districts. Obviously, Louisiana itself, and there are others. And Peter, this is a fight the Democrats started, and now they are flipping their you-know-what over it because they're losing the redistricting wars. They did what they did in California, they're trying to do it. Obviously, all of New England and most of the northeastern states are blue states, and they have gerrymandered themselves. Republicans are now responding in kind and getting favorable rulings on doing so. And suddenly, despite $5 gas, despite an unpopular war, Republicans may be poised to actually win this thing because of the newly drawn districts in November. Break it down.
Yeah, that's true. It's difficult to project how it's going to end up, but it does look, when you look at the maps and look at what the potential gerrymanders are going to look like, I think that Republicans probably are not going to suffer the traditional midterm losses that are expected and was expected before the decision. I think that I don't think that Republicans are necessarily doing backflips. They still have to work hard and make sure that they're being smart about any redistricting efforts, because courts could flip them back, or some of them back. But I do think that this gives Republicans I don't want to say necessarily enormous, but a fairly significant advantage if done properly. And it's not an advantage that is unfair. It's done the right way, frankly. So when you look at some of the gerrymandered districts put together by Democrats, I mean, they look ridiculous, and they are in many cases overtly racist in the traditional sense of the term. So I think it's a good decision. I mean, I think it's a good decision from the standpoint of, I do think it follows the law. It's a good decision if you are solely political and looking for political power, if you're a Republican, and that's why Democrats are apoplectic.
Yeah, and Peter, I was talking to Senator Moreno last night on a private briefing situation with just our paid supporters of this show. I didn't know this was a thing. You probably did because you're Peter Kirsanow, but the Virginia Supreme Court, which ruled that the referendum that was held to redraw Virginia's map, which was 6-5 Democrat over Republican, because it's almost a 50% majority or a 50% split in that state, 60-40 anyway, which makes sense. So it was a 6-5 Democrat over Republican leaning district. Then they had that referendum completely rigged and blatantly inaccurate in terms of its description. Vote yes if you want fairer maps, or I'm sorry, if you want fair elections. And then a yes vote for, quote, fair elections, which who's going to vote against that? A yes vote means that we're going to gerrymander this state from 6-5 to 10-1, which is just absolute garbage. But that's how they worded it. Well, the Virginia Supreme Court, as you know, said that was unconstitutional, and they wiped that out. And they're going to go back to the districts the way they were for this upcoming midterm election. The response to that, and I didn't know this was a thing, that the Democrats in Virginia are trying to remove every justice on the Virginia State Supreme Court. Senator Moreno told me, yeah, that's a thing. They can. I'd never heard of that before. What do you know?
Yeah, I'd never even thought about it before, and I think most sane, normal people who've got lives have never thought about it before. But we're talking about Democrats here, and we're talking about political power, and they'll do whatever they can, as we know, and they're better. This is all, to my Democratic friends, and I do have a lot of Democratic friends out there, this is not a pejorative toward you or any individual Democrat. It's a part of the party apparatus, that it is the party of politics, and they're good at it, but they're also ruthless about it, and they care about power, and everything else is secondary. Again, this is about the elite Democratic leadership. It's not about individual Democrats. But some may say that's true of Republicans. It may be true of a few Republicans, where Republicans are babes in the woods when it comes to political power compared to Democrats. And take it from an old man. I've seen it my entire life. Democrats do not play around, because this is all they do. This is all they're good at, is the politics of it. The actual administration of a state or of a country, they're horrible at. They screw it up entirely. Maybe they get a little things here, they're correct, but that's just happenstance. So we've got to win these redistricting wars. I think we will. When Virginia's Supreme Court says this is wrong, it's wrong. And I don't think that they're going to be, I think that the majority of people in Virginia will probably let their legislators know that the whole idea about abolishing the Supreme Court or getting rid of the state Supreme Court is a non-starter.
Well, what I didn't know when I asked Bernie how they can do that, here's how it is. And I don't know if you're aware of this in that state or any others. I don't know if Ohio has something like this or not. But what the senators told me last night was, they can simply put in an age restriction. You cannot serve in the Virginia State Supreme Court if you're over the age of 54. 54 is the cutoff. He said they can do that. They can do that in the assembly, in their legislature, and say that's the restriction. And then guess what? Every member of the Virginia Supreme Court is over age 54. Then they will all have to be removed, and then the governor gets to appoint new ones under the age of 54, somebody who will approve their maps and completely bastardize the entire electoral process. That's something I did not know existed, and I wonder if it's here or any other states.
I didn't know it existed, and immediately when you start saying about age restrictions such as that, I wonder about the legality of it. I think that that's something that's obviously would be heavily litigated because there are things. The Age Discrimination in Employment Act may not apply to it, but there may be other provisions that apply. I simply don't know. I'd have to think it through. All I know is whenever you try to be cute, whenever anyone tries to be cute in respect to that, there's always going to be challenges, and very often they're successful.
Yeah, and that would be devastating, honestly, if it did, because the people have been saved there. I think the people, and it's not just Virginia, because obviously what we're talking about here affects all of us. It's like all of that fraud, going on in Columbus. We talked about last week that the Daily Wire exposed, and billions and billions of dollars being stolen by Somali nationals who are sending it all back to their country, which is what
or to the Democratic Party,
or how about both? Because you're right, yes, they do it to both. Point being, though, that's all Americans are affected by that, because those are federal and state tax dollars, that are being taken here. Well, whatever happens in Virginia affects all of us, because again, if they go from 6-5 to 10-1, and we lose the majority by a seat or two, and 4 of them or 5 of them were taken away from us by way of what they just did in Virginia, or if it was done in any of the other states, for crying out loud, it literally, again, kills the country. It kills the republic, because the Democrats take the House, very likely, or possibly the Senate, and Pete, all bets are off at that point.
Yeah, I would hope that some Democrats would put country ahead of party, but
Fetterman.
In the age of Trump, especially, we haven't seen that. We really haven't.
No, just Fetterman.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and there may be, 1 or 2 others, but it's a troubling. I won't say that it's a development, because it's something that has always been ingrained in some elements of the Democratic Party, but it's just completely naked and rabid right now, and it's a troubling prospect. I think that we have to protect these institutions, not just for the sake of preserving, some balance in political power, but because we want to preserve the heritage of the United States of America. We were bequeathed an incredible structure, and the Democrats are playing with fire and trying to tear it down.
No question about it. Peter, I want to go back to something from last week. I did an entire hour on this, I think, just ranting myself, and I did a video on it, a separate video on it too, and that is the advancement of socialism and socialist ideology in this country, by way of people like Mamdani and Bernie Sanders, obviously, and Katie Wilson
AOC.
and AOC. Bingo, you nailed it. AOC last week, and I'm sure you saw it. I don't think we've talked about this, have we? About the billionaire?
No, I don't think we've talked about AOC.
Yeah. So AOC last week on a podcast declared that it is impossible to earn $1 billion. And the billionaires that exist in the United States, they didn't earn it. They exploited people. They paid people below living wages. They basically cheated their way there to get this. And there's no way that anybody can actually earn $1 billion. And like I said, I did almost an entire show on it, about an hour on it, talking about the extraordinarily flawed thinking that is, but more importantly, the ideology behind it, which is, again, there should be a cap on what everybody should be allowed to make, according to these people, which of course disincentivizes advancement and achievement, and it brings about stagnation. How dangerous that is for a free market, which of course they don't like, is the free market. Anyway, I ran on about it for a while, and I want to get your esteemed opinion or view of why this is starting to grow and spread a little bit more, that the socialists, used to be 1 or 2 of them, are starting to gain ground.
I think it's because of lack of vigilance on the part of the rest of us, because there's always going to be this germination of socialism out there. It's like a disease, and I don't think I'm overstating things. You have, first of all, we could talk about this for a long time. You've got the AOCs of the world, and can we be frank about this? AOC truly is not the smartest person in the room and never has been, and that's a problem. But she's been elevated mainly because she's a useful idiot, using the traditional sense of that term. And she and Bernie Sanders, maybe the king of useful idiots, and a few others have embraced socialism. Socialism is the ideology of envy and stupidity. And many of your viewers out there, because I know them, their families or they have escaped from that. Bernie's did. Bernie's escaped from that type of pernicious ideology. And they will tell you, you don't want to go back to this stuff because there's no return, because it metastasizes. It is, first, it affects the economy, but then it affects individual freedoms and enterprises in the most horrific ways. People like me who have seen it among our family members, who have family members who died because of it, we say, don't go down this path under any circumstances. And because our educational system, unfortunately, has been appropriated by those who think that socialism is a great thing, this is metastasized in our society. We don't do enough, I think, as conservatives and Republicans, although we do things, but we don't do enough of it to push back on this hard and say, and educate people that this is not the way we want to go. Even if you don't care about the ideology per se, if you want to prosper in this country, if you want to prosper in any country, you've got to abandon socialism. It is a suffocating, horrible enterprise. And, you know, I'm still baffled, and maybe because I'm an old man, but I'm baffled as to how AOC can get any kind of resonance in a country that's got an IQ above room temperature. It's really
more than that. She's still considered to be a potential candidate for president for them.
I know. Stunning.
You know, I mean, the fact that she's in Congress, like you said, being one of the dimmer bulbs in the lamp. Aside from that, the radical socialism, she is not just holding under her seat. She is considered to be a potential challenger in this whole thing. Now, I know that's a big field of you know, and being the tallest person in a room full of, you know, short people isn't exactly a great thing, and it's not a strong field out there. But still, if she's part of it, that's shocking. It
is shocking. It's to the point of being almost frightening, because you've got folks who are, you're saying to yourself, if you're of like my age, or you're looking at this saying, how could this evolve like this? How could this happen? And part of it is because I think many of us, I'll speak for myself, and I wasn't, but many of us on our side of the aisle were asleep at the switch. We couldn't we couldn't imagine that this would gain a foothold to this extent in this country. But if you take a look at the educational establishment, take a look at media, if it's not overtly promoted, it's subtly promoted, and many, many more people adopt this. And, you know, you look at how AOC is lionized by many in the media and many in the educational establishment. It's something that's baffling, but it's something that we have to push back on. We can't simply say, well, no one's going to take this seriously, because unfortunately, like you said, take a look in New York City. You got Mamdani.
Yes.
You know, I think that after a while, people are going to understand that was a major mistake. But that's what typically happens with socialism. You make the mistake, and sometimes you can't pull back from it. And you keep going down that slippery slope, a little bit by increments, one step at another. And I think we've got to push back hard. We've got to be out there like you are, Bob, and educating people on this. If not educating, continuing, because people may know it, keeping it at front of mind. This is a dangerous, dangerous enterprise. And, you know, again, I'm baffled by how AOC can get any kind of purchase, regardless of how people may have an appeal towards socialism, because she's such a poor representative of it. She doesn't articulate it very well. Neither does Bernie Sanders, frankly. But there are those. I would say Mamdani might be in one of those categories. I mean, what he says is stupid on belief, but he's kind of a, and I'm not trying to, praise him, but he's somewhat more charismatic, and I think he's a little bit more articulate than these others are.
That's how he won. His charisma. I mean, he looks good. He's always smiling. Everything is positive. He's a very, very sharp and smooth talker, and 100%, because he didn't win on his ideas. He won on that charisma. I completely agree. And that is evidence of, in the billionaire thing aside, what's happening in New York right now should be, and what's happening in Seattle, for example, they're mirrors of one another, one on each coast. The socialist mayor of Seattle has been informed that her new plan to raise taxes on the wealthy, the business owners and so forth, massively in order to fund a whole bunch of socialist programs, is leading to massive exodus of businesses. And she looked into the camera during a presser about this and said, "Bye." Like, okay. Give this a few months and tell me if you're still saying bye, or if you're not doing what Mamdani has already done, which is saying, and Hochul too, come back, bring these businesses back. Because Mamdani, 6 months into his term, is out of money. And he's literally asking Hochul for a state bailout. All of this free buses, free this, free that, free everything else that socialism promises. Again, how many times have you repeated the famous line? Socialism is great until you run out of other people's money. Right?
Exactly right.
And that's what's happening in New York. And if you look at those two big cities as a model, why would anybody embrace socialism ever again and try to think about nationalizing it?
Yeah, because it's all about power. It's the power of the people who are at the top, the power of people who are administrating the socialist structure. And it's a seductive. Yeah, it is. And it's a seductive enterprise. It sounds nice. It sounds good. It sounds like the kind of thing you read about in kindergarten, for example. But it's the most destructive ideology in the history of the world. And once people, remember that, unfortunately, I don't think that we teach it well enough. And again, the seduction part of it, I think, may counterbalance any kind of true knowledge you may have about it or the history of it. But it's expanding, and I wish that more people in a position of authority, more people who have access to, media, would challenge this forthrightly like you are. Or Bernie Moreno's phenomenal at this kind of stuff because he understands it intuitively. But you've got to push back on this. This is a horrid enterprise, and you don't come back from this. You don't come back from it. Once you get to the tipping point, game over.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one more point on this before I pivot or segue, Pete, is AOC, I call her ADC because she's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as far as I'm concerned. But she also declared that the Revolutionary War that we celebrate the beginning of this country in a couple of months here for 250 years, the Revolutionary War was fought against the billionaires of their time. That's why we declared our independence, was to get away from the billionaires of their time. That's literally that's literally one of the other things that she said in trying to defend and double down after she was just excoriated for her "no one can earn $1 billion" thing. The fact that Bill Gates put a computer in every home on every desk in the country and the world, he didn't earn that. The fact that Mark Zuckerberg thought of an idea in a Harvard dorm room that billions of people across the planet use, and he shouldn't make the money from that idea. All of these people, we can go on to Henry Ford, put the assembly line together. Nobody earns their $1 billion. But then after she was excoriated for that, she doubled down and said this country was founded on opposing billionaires, the billionaires of their time. Is that how you remember studying the Revolutionary War?
I'm going to have to go back to K through 12, Bob. I guess I got a really bad education. That's not how I understood the Revolutionary War. I think maybe AOC's been watching Netflix a little bit too much. I'm not sure what's going on there. But nonetheless, we know the answer to this, but where's the media on this? And frankly, where are the Republicans on this? She is a dangerous, dangerous person because a lot of people find her to be attractive. We're baffled by it, but her appeal can't be underestimated. And Republicans need to come out like in the Merinos of the world, the people who can really articulate this well and give you the dichotomy between what AOC says and the real world of socialism. But they've got to push back on this because it's very easy to slide into that morass. Speaking of morasses, that's where AOC is. But what's Bernie Sanders' excuse? I mean, this is a guy I don't know how old he is now, but he's in his 80s. It's one thing to be young and be a fool, but when you get to that age and you're still a fool, there's no excuse for that.
Yeah, well, he's in this stage of his life where he's training the fools to succeed him,
Yeah.
and he's doing a fairly good job of it. Sad to say. So here's my segue, Pete, from the socialism here in the United States to President Trump yesterday, saying he's deadly serious. Now he has said this about Greenland. He has said it about Canada. Now he's saying it about formerly socialist, only because he deposed the dictator Maduro, but that Venezuela is the next 51st state of the United States of America. He wants to acquire Venezuela, make it a state, and then keep the revenues from their massive, massive resources of oil in the United States economy. Your thoughts?
I laughed out loud when he said that because only Trump would say something like that. Only Trump would have the audacity, as they say, to say something like that. Yeah, but then you start thinking about, but then after that, he's pushing what's known, the Overton window. He's pushing it a little bit so that things that you'd never think about before, all of a sudden you start thinking about and become plausible. And I don't know that that's a good idea. And you don't just simply take on another country as a 51st state. There are a whole host of reasons why you don't want to do that. And but and he did it with Greenland. He's talking about some other places too. But you start to wonder, back say 60, 70 years ago, or even before that, the Louisiana Purchase, or acquisition of Alaska, Hawaii. There are probably some pushback on that too. It turns out that Alaska is probably a pretty good idea, taking on Alaska, purchasing Alaska. There's a lot of resources there, and does it make sense for Venezuela? I don't know. From a cultural standpoint, I'm not sure that that's a great fit. And there's a million other reasons why we should be careful about things like that. But only Trump would do that. And again, pushing the Overton window, he expands the possible. And who knows what other enterprises or what other territories that might make sense to acquire and become part of the United States of America. Not as a state necessarily, with voting power and all the implications of that, but possibly as a territory. Who knows?
Yeah, well, he said state, obviously, but he has said that about a lot of things, and it's pretty wild to consider. He was kind of riffing on a lot of different things yesterday, and this is in advance of him heading to Beijing. Give me your insights, Pete, as to where we are right now with respect to this war. Gas is $5.
Yeah.
National average is like 450. We are like 9th highest in the country for some strange reason or another, having to do with our refineries here in Ohio, and I don't know exactly what all. But this is something that is obviously unsustainable, and the president knows that, and he has said it'll be over soon. And when it's over, the prices will go back down to normal. The strait will be open, blah, blah, blah. But it is not looking like it's close to being over. And in fact, he said that, this is last week, he said that the prices where they are now could last until November. And this is weird because every other day he says that, but then he'll say this thing should be done. We'll have a deal in a week. I never know what to believe on this whole thing. So tell me, as he heads to Beijing, can the enemy of my enemy be my friend a little bit here? Beijing's economy, or China's economy, is being hit way harder than ours is by the lack of oil being shipped out of the Strait of Hormuz from Iranian soil. So do you think that maybe somehow the president puts his head together with his enemy, Xi Jinping, to find a way to open things up for the betterment of both of our economies? And do you think that could help get this thing over with?
I think there's going to be an effort, and I don't know that's going to be concluded at this particular meeting or anytime in the future, but I think there's going to be an effort to do that because everybody needs oil, and China needs it more than we do, as President Trump has said very, very forthrightly. I mean, there's no doubt about that. This war, I would argue, was, or at least the reason for it, I think, was necessary. And not so much a war, but the destruction of the ability of Iran to have a nuclear weapon was imperative. Everyone else kicked the can down the road. And once they acquired a nuclear weapon, all bets would be off. And it would be a horrible prospect for the world, let alone the United States of America. But now I think we've gotten beyond that. Their nuclear capacity has to a large extent been completely destroyed. Yes, there is the dust and all of that stuff, but I think that's something to reconstitute their nuclear program would take a long, long, long time. So I think we've gotten that breathing room there. But
Well,
now,
if that's true, Peter, if that's true, why wouldn't he just declare victory and walk away?
I don't know.
Because they, I mean,
Yeah.
the belief from the administration is that it's more than just dust, that there is a whole lot of enriched uranium under the ground that they've got buried, that they've got protected from bunker busters, and even the ones that we dropped from the B-2s last August.
Yeah.
That is what we have to physically take control of, to take it away from them before we would ever feel finally, okay, now Iran is no longer a threat. That's the messaging.
If our intelligence establishment, our military believe that they still have the capacity, I'll believe that, and I say continue to hit them. I was of the impression, again, based on what happened last year and what's happened because what we've done thus far has been extraordinary in terms of decimating or destroying their war-making capacity in so many ways, just even taking out their leadership. I was of the impression that, we're pretty much done with this. And I think most Americans wish us to be done with it. Even though we're not suffering casualties. This is the remarkable thing. We're not suffering casualties. We're suffering an increase in gas prices. And I don't want to diminish that because I don't like going to the pump, and paying a lot more than we were just a couple of months ago. But is it something that we can get over in time? Probably so. I think the problem is that Republicans right now are looking at November looming, and people are making their decisions right now as to who they're going to vote for. And to unpack that's going to be very difficult. Election cycles operate in certain defined increments. And once a narrative has been established, you're not going to be able to change that narrative effectively before the election turns around and bites you in the butt. So he's walking a tightrope right now. And I guarantee you the Republicans are apoplectic about it because they think that, we're maybe beyond the point of no return. And a lot of Republicans are going to suffer as we typically would, being the party in power during the midterm, but maybe a little bit worse.
Well, from the president's response yesterday to the Iranians' latest response to his overtures to end this thing, he said it's totally unacceptable. He called it a piece of garbage or a pile of garbage or something like that.
I understand this too.
We may end up having another bombing run start tomorrow. As far as we know, it might be back on in full again. And I know people are weary of that. I hope they keep in mind what you just said, that some things are necessary. If that's what it takes for us to make sure that Iran is never a threat again, that all of what we have done in the last 3 months has not been for naught, we have to take control of that uranium and take it away from them, because they say that they are a few steps away from having enough to make 11 nuclear bombs. If we don't take that away, then all of this will have been for naught. And we want this to be over quickly, but we also want it to be over successfully in making that happen. Right?
Yeah. Trump is, he wrote The Art of the Deal. And as somebody who negotiates for a living, I look at him almost in awe because he's very good at what he does. I've watched, and we've all watched his career, but you watch his career, and if you look at it longitudinally, you understand that he says certain things in March with a certain idea in mind for what will happen in November or in October. And I think that this is part of a strategy on his part, again, expanding the Overton window as to what is indeed possible. So, I don't discount that Iran probably has some nuclear capability. I think it's been severely diminished. I think it makes sense to completely eliminate it if it's possible. But I think we've gotten a long way there, gone a long way there, and I give President Trump a lot of credit for that. And, good things don't come without a price, and that price right now is higher gas prices. Don't want to diminish that because I really don't like it either. This is the highest I've seen in my lifetime. And if Joe Biden, frankly, we got nothing out of Joe Biden, but we got higher gas prices nonetheless. If Joe Biden had gotten us to this point, we would be screaming, and we should be saying things about it.
Yeah, to your point, by the way, this isn't the highest you've seen it in your lifetime. It was higher under Biden. It was topping out at $5.15 a gallon nationally, national average during Biden's war on fossil fuels, as well as coming out of COVID and all the other things in his, all of the policies he put in place. So it was $5.15 for a period of time. So far, I think the national average right now is $4.50. For us here in Ohio, it's $5. But nationally, it was worse under Biden, and he didn't even bring us anything to show for it, such as
Right.
disarming a potential nuclear power, which is what the goal is here. So,
Right.
hey Pete, last one, you brought up elections a moment ago, and so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the governor's race. It's official now since we last spoke, which was last week. Vivek is going to be challenged by Amy Acton. Size up that battle for me. The polls have shown almost neck and neck, and that's a wide cross section of polls. I don't think it's all necessarily push polling from one side or the other, but I'm seeing a neck and neck thing. There are a lot of Republicans who aren't necessarily sold on Vivek. Every Democrat is going to be sold on Amy Acton simply because she's a Democrat. So what is your read at this stage?
I think Vivek wins, and I think it may not be by a large margin, but I think it's going to be a comfortable margin for several reasons. One is this is a Republican state. This is one of the most Republican states in the country, outside of Oklahoma, Idaho, Montana, a few other places. This is a deep red state, and people don't acknowledge that because we're in the Midwest and we have a lot of large urban centers. But this is anywhere from a +8 to a +11 red state, and I think that helps Vivek. Number two is Amy Acton. People still remember from 5 years ago. I remember I was one of the few people going to work in downtown Cleveland during that period of time, and on the way to work, listening to Amy Acton, and and I don't know why DeWine gave her this authority, frankly, but that's a whole nother conversation. But Amy Acton telling us what we can and can't do.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of voters are not just like me. I mean, I'm a certified right-wing crank, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I think a lot of voters didn't like that. And a lot of folks who had their businesses or employment affected as a result of that. Look, people suffered economic loss as a result of many of the stupid things that a lot of states did. Now, with all due respect, this was something a little bit new. We had this pandemic that we hadn't had before, so there are going to be mistakes made. But those types of mistakes should have been rectified very quickly because we started getting information about, excuse me, the effect of these lockdowns, but more importantly, the fact that these lockdowns were not having any kind of salutary effect. So I think Vivek is going to win. And on top of that, I think Vivek, I know that Vivek, in my discussions with a lot of folks that aren't necessarily conservative, but even some conservatives, for whatever reason, he kind of rubs some people the wrong way. I happen to like Vivek. I think I was one of the first people ever to interview Vivek years ago before he was Vivek. I interviewed him when he first wrote his book. And I thought to myself, and I may have even mentioned it to you, Bob, because we were on the radio together, that I thought this was one of the smartest guys I've ever met. Now, simply because you're smart doesn't mean you're going to be good at being a governor or any other kind of politician. But I do think that he's matured a lot, and I don't mean to be condescending in saying this. I think he's matured as a politician, but also as a thinker, and I think he could be very, very effective. So I think, but long-winded to say, I think he'll win. And if he were in a closer state in terms of +8 Republican, he might have a little bit of a problem. But I think Amy Acton is a non-starter in the state of Ohio.
Gosh, I hope you're right. I'm a little worried because I know the Democrats are going to do the whole crawl over broken glass, the proverbial thing, to win Congress. And so when they come out in huge numbers for those races, they're going to, of course, be out there to vote for Amy Acton. And according to what some in the Republican Party are saying, they're going to sit it out because they do not like Vivek for a variety of reasons, whether it be from the data centers to the H-1B visas to other reasons. I hope there aren't too many Republicans, because you're right about this being a red state. Although you call it deep red, I call it hot pink, because quite frankly, I don't think rhino red is very red at all. I would like it to be conservative blood red rather than rhino red. But be that as it may, if a number of them stay home because they're just not enthused by Vivek, and they're maybe a little bit disenchanted by the Trump agenda because of the gas prices and so forth, if we don't come out in massive numbers, we might be in for a shock, Pete. And I'd
Yeah,
rather
I think
see
it's
that now
important.
6 months out. That if I was saying this, in October, I'd be really, really worried. Right now, there's a long time, but we've got to rally people and say we cannot be out enthused by these people, or else they're going to turn out and we're not.
Yeah, the Democrats are going to be enthused all over the country, but if they think that they have a whiff of being successful in Ohio, boy, they're going to pull out all the stops and tons of money is going to be poured in, which will happen anyway.
Yeah.
But I hope that people can put aside whatever disaffection they've got for Vivek, for whatever reason it is, and I understand some of the reasons for it. But look at what the alternative is. And it's not simply Amy Acton, which is bad enough, but it's the Democratic Party and what their agenda is. There are certain things you don't lightly come back from. And one of them is going from a red state to a blue state. Because the Democrats, unfortunately, Republicans do not play like the Democrats. And we've been sounding this refrain for a long time. Democrats play for keeps. All they're good at is politics. Governing, they're horrible at. Almost
Terrible.
everything else they're horrible at, but they're extremely good at politics. Republicans are horrible at politics. They're not necessarily great at governing, but they're a sight better than Democrats are. So I'm hopeful that, and I know your listening audience understands the gravity of this and the importance of voting for Vivek, even if they don't necessarily agree with him or kind of put off by whatever aspect of his personality they're put off by. But anyway, my 2 cents are that I generally like Vivek as a person. He is, in many respects, too smart for his own good. I mean, this guy is brilliant. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, this guy's an amazing intellect. And maybe that's what puts off a lot of people.
It does. I think for some people it does, Peter. And I talk to a lot of people in conservative chat rooms and things online that you're not a part of. It is a thing. There are a lot of the grassroots folks who are saying that Vivek has lost touch with the grassroots conservatives. He is talking to the elites. He's talking above the voters, and he's not engaging with them. He's coming to events late, leaving early, things of that nature that just kind of make it make it appear as though. And I've met him and talked to him on a number of occasions, and I like him a lot. I don't think that's him, but the appearance is what it is. Okay, or is that it is, according to a lot of grassroots people who say he's got to reconnect and get out there amongst the people and not just be speaking above them from podiums. And I think that's a legitimate thing that hopefully I'm supposed to interview him tonight. As a matter of fact, a recorded one for tonight. And if so, I'm going to bring this up to him. But I think that's the one thing that he needs to do is reconnect with the true grassroots conservatives in the state. If he does that, Peter, then I'd be in 100% agreement with you. He's going to win going away. But that's got to happen first.
And the good news is that Vivek is smart enough to understand that. Vivek is, I believe, I don't know him well or anything like that, but I believe, observing him, that he is smart enough to be introspective and understand. He does a self-critical examination of himself because he wants to win. This guy understands what's necessary to win. And he does have a +8 advantage. So he doesn't want to squander that. Right. But I think that by simply, the one thing he can do is simply say, look at my opponent, Amy Acton. That's all he really has to do. And I think most people, they're not going to necessarily crawl over broken glass, but they'll make sure they get to the polls.
God willing. Peter Kirsanow, terrific analysis. As always, my friend, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you very much. And
by the way, Bob, I will be, tomorrow, I'll be at the McJames Sports Pub in Parma, again, speaking to the Parma Republicans.
Awesome.
I think, you and I have been there before.
Yep.
McJames Sports Pub, it's on Brook Park. Come out and see me again.
I think it changed its name, Peter. I think Adam has launched Adamos.
Really?
They've reimagined. Okay. Yeah. He's converted it from a sports pub to a wonderful Italian restaurant called Adamos.
Okay, it's on Snow Road.
Yeah.
Snow Road in Brook Park. Come out there. You and I have both been there. I've been there a couple of times. Great crowd out there. So I'll be speaking out there tomorrow. Come see me. I've got all kinds of great things to say.
6 o'clock? Is that a 6 event?
It's 6 or 6:30.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure they don't want to miss anything. If they get a chance to see you in person, I know they love that. Great stuff, Pete. Thank you, my friend. Have a great time tomorrow night. We'll talk to you.
Bye-bye.
All right. All right, there you go. That's Peter Kirsanow as we get ready to wrap it. But before I wrap it, I need to remind you that this episode has been brought to you in part by our friend, the politically incorrect mechanic, Charlie Kalani, Charlie's Auto Repair in Lakewood. Have you scheduled your oil change and tire rotation yet for the next one? Get away from the traditional or typical spot that you've been using and take your car out to Charlie, because Charlie is going to not only take care of those maintenance things that you need, but Charlie is going to make sure that your car is tip top from top to bottom. All right. Preventative maintenance is the key to making any good car last. But then when it breaks down, that's the trouble. People take it into a garage and they have no idea what's wrong with it. They just know what it's doing and what it's sounding like. And they're going to trust that the guy inside who knows you don't know squat is going to give you an honest price and an honest assessment. Yeah, probably not. He's not gonna. Most of them don't. Sad to say, but they take advantage of your naivete and your lack of knowledge about what's going on inside of an engine. That's why you want somebody you can trust. And I can tell you, Charlie Kalani is MAGA through and through. He's America First through and through, and he is a Christian through and through, and he is somebody you can absolutely trust. He's not going to upcharge you on labor. He's not going to replace things that don't need replaced. You've got something to be fixed. He'll fix it and it alone and make sure that your price reflects that. All right. And speaking of price, first responders, active military veterans, and I'm sitting here holding up fingers like you can see me. I've got the graphic on the screen. Stupid me. First responders, active military veterans, and concealed carry license holders. You get 10% off all services at Charlie's Auto Repair in Lakewood. So check that out for yourself. 216-410-0170. I'll read it again, even though it's on the screen. 216-470-0170. That is Charlie's Auto Repair. And Charlie is a foundational supporter and partner of Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. Thanks for being in today. That interview that I did with Jacob from the Casey Putsch campaign, that's going to get some people talking. I want you to be talking about it. All right. The way it started was very different than the way it ended. There were some things there that I guarantee you, if he wasn't a 19-year-old kid, that would have gone a lot differently. If he had been a 30-year-old, communist or, Nick Fuentes worshiping, it would have gone differently. I was trying to be respectful and give a little bit of grace to a young man who's been influenced by some people. If you missed it, all I'm going to say is share. If you saw it, share it with somebody who missed it. Share the episode, share that full interview. I want to hear what people had to say about it, because he's somebody who's supposed to be on our side, but isn't reflective of a lot of the things that you and I believe in. All right. That was very, very racially driven. It was very, very religiously intolerant. It was a lot of the things that the left says about us that doesn't reflect us. And yet somehow we're going to have to get these people to vote the same way we want them to vote. It's a very, very interesting and in some ways disturbing interview. Share it with people who missed it. Share this episode. It's very easy. Right-click the URL, use the QR code, do whatever you've got to do to get this in front of other people, okay? Because I want to hear what you all have to say about it. Put something in the comments, too, under this video if you're watching this on replay. All right, everybody, thanks to Peter Kirsanow. Thanks to Jacob Tilley from the Putsch campaign for that very illuminating interview. And thanks to you. Be well, be safe, and stay free. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.